You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
오빤 Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
After years of success in South Korea, Psy's global crossover hit Gangnam Style may have been the beginning of a K-pop boom in the States that's still happening today. This week on the podcast, Matt and I talk with Nerdcore rapper Lex the Lexicon Artist, who wanted to discuss this mega hit, his other songs worth checking out, and how Psy fits in with other Nerdcore artists.
오빤 Gangnam Style.
One hit is all you need to make the money guaranteed, and you can live off royalties forever.
And it makes me wonder, is it just a wonder, or is it one hit thunder?
All right, so today our guest is Lex the Lexicon Artist, and we are talking about Psy. And Lex, you have a unique perspective on Psy that Matt and I may not have because you grew up in Taiwan. So we can start with that right off the bat. Were you still living in Taiwan when Psy came out, or were you already here?
I was right on the cusp of moving from Taiwan to the US. When Gangnam Style came out, that was 2012. It was July 2012. And I moved to the US around August of 2012.
So you got to see both sides, but it was a worldwide hit, right? It was a hit everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably the number one song there as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall if it was. I think it was. I think that, yeah, it was making waves, obviously, like in the Asian circles, but I don't think it was until August when I made it to the US and moved there for college that I really started seeing like the viral impact that the song was having on like my communities and on, you know, the students in my dorm. At the college campus in my dorm was where I was first hearing this song being like pumped out in like loudspeakers and stuff. So I think that it might have had even a bigger impact on the West than it did in the East, because maybe people in the East, you know, were already familiar with this artist.
Were people, you know, able to do this dance that is associated with this song? Because it seems like you have to be a real athlete. This isn't the Macarena or something. This is a serious dance. I guess it's emulating riding a horse is a big part of it. I feel like if I did this dance for 30 seconds, I would be drenched in sweat.
I mean, if you watch Psy doing it live, he's also drenched in sweat, but he does it like perfectly. Yep. My opinion is, I think there are some parts of the dance that are more difficult than others. Definitely the Hey Sexy Lady part where his legs just go crazy. And that part I can't do. That part I think is the part that a professional dancer can really do. The horse riding, I think like most people can master. You know, I think a lot of people are able to master that. You know, suffice to say, like Psy choreographs most of his stuff, and you know, he's a professional dancer. So definitely all the signature moves that he comes up with are a little more complicated than the Macarena.
True.
So I have a question. Obviously, like here in the States, this was the first time any of us had heard of Psy, but doing research for this, I mean, he definitely was a controversial figure pretty much right at the start of his career. Were you aware of him pre-Gangnam Style, or was this also your first introduction to him?
I was not aware of him pre-Gangnam Style. However, I was aware of K-pop, and this is something that I think is really important to bring up. Is Psy is definitely like an international one-hit wonder. It's definitely garnered views, and it's definitely not a flop, I think, like his later releases. But as far as like a really, really big splash, I think like Gangnam Style, like that's it, you know? However, he's definitely like famous in Korea, right? Like he had a career before this in Korea, and he was doing what he wanted essentially. And when Gangnam Style dropped, it just happened to blow up. Now, I personally was not aware of him, but I was aware of like other types of K-pop, like other bands. And, you know, around that time, K-pop was like popular in the East, but I don't know if it had like gigantic international appeal. And by that, I mean, you know, there were a couple of bands like, you know, Girls' Generation, like Big Bang, and, you know, I'm trying to think of other bands, 2NE1. You know, there's some big bands that were, you know, kind of making splashes in some like partially English songs during that time in the early 2010s, you know, late 2000s. But, you know, I went back on the Gangnam Style video and I looked at all the comments, and it confirmed something that I'd been suspecting for a while, which is for a lot of people, Gangnam Style was the first K-pop song that they had heard ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but also kind of sincere. Like, you could make an argument that BTS wouldn't be this massive group that they are if Psy didn't kind of open that door, because you two are musicians. I'm not. But I feel like this song is a very important song in the way that it shows how YouTube slowly took over the music industry.
Absolutely. That was the argument that I was going to make, which is I think BTS and Blackpink, you know, like the new generation of K-pop, like they would not have had this opportunity of a breakthrough if Psy had not happened. And here's why I think that's true. Like some people might argue with me, but I think Gangnam Style really brought Korean music and Korean identity to the forefront. Because before that, I'm sure that, you know, barring everyone in Asia who already knew what Koreans were, like there are a lot of people in Western society who are like, okay, so this is Chinese food. This is Japanese food. Well, now what is this? Like, what is this song what is this language that he's singing in? I don't recognize this. Oh, it's Korean? It's right. Korean. Oh, so there's a country called Korea. And now from there, it just had this like really gigantic international explosion. People actually knew what, you know, Koreans were. I would argue that it put it on the international scene, the Western scene in particular, paving the way for this like even bigger explosion of K-pop that you're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think back on this song, and I mean, it as a lot of the songs are on a podcast about one-hit wonders, think of the song as a novelty song. You know, it's
for sure.
It's, I think that if there was a novelty section in the record store, this would be at the forefront of that section. But now, when I watched the music video today, and I think at the time I kind of just like wrote it off. I'm like, oh, whatever. This is another stupid song that's on the radio. And I watched the music video today. I'm like, this is pretty funny. This is good. This is funny. And it's also, I was like, man, I wish I could go back to 2012 when things were so much. I know,
right? Don't remind me.
Remember the time when Gangnam Style was this giant thing, and that was something that we would think about.
Yeah.
So that was something that I actually wanted to get some clarity. And I imagine Lex is going to be the person who understands it better than I will. But like, there's part of me that feels like there's two ways that people watch the music video. And I would say plainly that it's people who are in on the joke and people who aren't in on the joke. And I think that there's the one group that's like, they look at Gangnam Style and they're like, oh, this is just a version of like the stereotypes that we've seen on The Simpsons and everything else that like
with Asians. Yeah.
Asians are crazy. But then like you like find out like, no, like the song is satire from the start. And if I'm understanding correctly from the research I read, referring to something as Gangnam Style is kind of like how we in the States look at like Portland or like Beverly Hills as like hyper hipster areas. Is that correct, or am I off with that?
Yeah, you're pretty much on the money with that. So, like, disclaimer: I don't speak Korean. I am part Korean. I have like some Korean background, so I'm familiar with like just a little bit, but I don't speak the language very well, and I will not say that I am Korean by any means. However, I have also done my research on what this song means. When people say Gangnam Style, Gangnam or Gangnam in Korean refers to south of the river. Gang meaning river, and Nam meaning south. So south of the river specifically is referring to a certain district in Seoul where it really quickly developed after, I think, the 1980s or 1990s, becoming this really hyper luxurious, hyper commercialized, very fancy, very high-end, expensive brands area. So people who are from there tend to be like, the stereotype is that they're very materialistic, or they love expensive bags, or they love to show off their wealth. So in a way, I think it's more like Beverly Hills than Portland. I don't know if like the hipster component is there as much, but like the concern about status and money is definitely there. And I would say that Gangnam Style is supposed to be a satire on the people who live there and who like to show off their wealth. So essentially the video is kind of like that too. It's basically Psy showing, two different sides of a person. One side is kind of bragging about how they're Gangnam Style. It's like in the song, there's some lyrics. I know the general idea. I don't know the direct translation, but he's talking about what kind of girl he's looking for. He's saying like, I want a girl that can afford a nice cup of coffee. I want a girl who's like, a lady during the day and goes wild at night and likes to party, but is like really classy. And he also talks about what kind of guy he is. He's talking about, I can like, one shot a coffee, like I just, drink a coffee. Like,
so I pulled up the translated lyrics, and my favorite line is, I'm a guy who downs his coffee in one gulp before it even cools down. Which is like such a weird bragging right, and I love it.
Yeah, he's trying to show this like kind of idea of toxic masculinity, I think, in a way where people are more concerned about, how they're looking instead of, the content. But he also says like, I have more ideas than muscles. Like my ideas are bulging and not my muscles. So he's making fun of himself too for not being like the typical gorgeous K-pop idol. But essentially he's saying that there's people who say these things, but actually they look kind of ridiculous. And that's what the video is about, right? Like he looks like he's being really fancy, but he's sitting on the toilet, or like he looks like he's swimming in a pool, but he's in the public bathhouse, right?
One of the interviews I read was that he made the video to be intentionally unhip, to make fun of how hip Gangnam Style is, which I thought was like, that was something that I would have, had I not read that interview, would have just went right over my head. But
yeah, I agree with that. And the funny thing is that you touched on this really important point, which is, I think part of the reason the video went viral, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I think it went viral was it really fits with this goofy Asian stereotype in the West. Like people think like Asians are crazy, like you mentioned that earlier, Asians are crazy. Like, oh, look at this goofy Asian guy. However, I think the difference between this and something like William Hung, which also blew up, but in the wrong way, right? I think the difference between this and that is that Psy is intentionally doing these things and knows what he's doing. And he also happens to be really talented and really entertaining. And I don't think that this is something that people can laugh at. Like they can, if you're looking at it from a surface point of view, you can like kind of laugh at him and say like, goofy Asian, ha ha ha. But if you look just one layer deeper, which I'm sure both of you have already, you can see that he's really talented. He's crafted this like really fun visual and, these really fun sounds, and he's just being himself. And even though he kind of fits into the stereotype on the surface, which makes him more palatable, this is actually him, and he can't actually sing, he can't actually dance. And, once you look under that layer, you're like, wait, this guy is the real deal, and he makes fun songs, and this is really catchy. Therefore, on a second level, he's even more appealing than on the surface.
Yeah, the dude can dance. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And he can sing, and he writes his song. He went. He seems like a multiple threat. He went for business administration school, and then then eventually dropped out, went to Berkeley College of Music instead, and which obviously was the right choice. But yeah, the dude's a beast, no doubt about it. And hey, back up for 1 second. I do want to talk about William Hung just for a second. I know that's a completely different thing, but I love William Hung. That dude, if people were, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that a majority of people were watching William Hung in way the wrong way, like making fun of him. But what he said after that was amazing. Like that was one of the best things I've ever seen on TV right after, and I forget exactly what he said, but basically it was like judges had ripped him apart or whatever, and he just basically said like, I did my best. And I thought that was like the most amazing thing. And I like to think that that's why he became a household name and not because of the ridiculous She Bangs performance.
No, I think it's a really important detour because it contributes to kind of the widespread, like overall impression that Western audiences have of Asian Americans and Asians in general.
Yeah, true.
And in that way, I think it actually does intersect in the way that these Asian faces get put on, national live TV or, radio play, that sort of thing. And it really forms an impression within the minds of Western audiences that are not familiar with Asian folks as much. And right. I think it's a topic worth discussing, and I don't mind if it went off topic. Like I certainly think that there's, they went viral for different reasons, but I think there's some similarities over there.
Yeah, and I mean, and now, just as you said, Psy kind of like opened that door for Korean music, for K-pop. BTS became... And what's crazy about BTS is I can't tell you one song by them, which is...
dude, Mic Drop is fire. I'll tell you that much.
Okay, well... I do know...
That's the one I know.
they have a song with Halsey that I know, but it's because it's on the Halsey album. But that being said, they are literally like the biggest band on earth, right? I believe that might be like quantitatively true, that just their sales and everything are...
I didn't look into this, and I probably should have now that we've brought it up, but like... Not only was like Gangnam Style was the first YouTube video to hit 1 billion views, right? But it's now currently the 7th most watched music video in YouTube history. And I have a feeling that at least one of the 6 above it has to be a BTS video. Just being friends with people. Yeah, like being friends with people who are hardcore BTS fans. They pay so much attention to the views and like how that band is trending. Like my friend literally called out of work when a new music video dropped because she felt like it was her duty to watch it over and over and over again for 24 hours to bump up the amount of plays to make sure that it was the #1 trending thing on YouTube. Like that's
God damn.
Dude, Chris, you need Punchline to get to that point.
I know. We need fans like that. You drop everything you're doing and only watch the video for the next 24 hours. Yo, I do have to say, we all have to take a moment and give a lot of credit to K-pop fans for how much they have been fucking with Trump.
Yeah.
God, it's so good.
That is the most amazing thing. I might not be that familiar with a lot of K-pop artists, but man, that makes me want to dig in deeper and just get into it.
Yeah. The thing about K-pop stans is that, like, first of all, I don't even think there were probably fans, honestly, like when I was growing up in Asia, I know that there were people who were really into K-pop, but like it was really kind of more of a regional thing, like Chinese people loved it, Japanese people loved it, Filipino people loved it, it's all like this regional like K-pop craze, right? But like when it went international, I think that was what started the K-pop stan movement, where you see the people who are like so committed and they're always posting fan cams on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen those things, but usually they just post like a video of like one of their bands like dancing, even when it's irrelevant, but all they want to do is like share the video of them dancing, right? So that's like the fan cam culture. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, a lot of like the K-pop stans that have like come out of the woodwork since K-pop went international, partially due to Psy, is they're surprisingly very leftist. Like they're very activist. They really care about social issues, and a lot of them are young, which contributes to that. But they also like using their platforms and their communities to uphold social movements, like Black Lives Matter, for example.
Doesn't that give you hope? Doesn't that give you a lot of hope at a very dark time?
Yeah. I think it does. And like these people being, objectively a lot younger than I am now, I think that they're a lot less cynical than I am. And I think that they're helping in their own way. And if K-pop stans want to like flood like a Trump ticketing site and make them think that they have more people attending when they actually don't. Like, I'm all for that, you know?
It's great. I saw people like arguing that that's not what happened or whatever, but come on now. That's what happened. They were smart. I think that Republicans just don't want to admit that they got played by K-pop fans. But can I ask a dumb question real quick that I'm sure you guys have the answer to? Where does Stan? What does that mean as opposed
Eminem.
to? Is that because of that? Is that really because of that?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's when you're like a super obsessed fan to the point that you want to emulate them.
I see. That's what I thought it was, but I was like, no way. There's no way they turned the name of that song into like a descriptive thing for a super fan. But okay, all right, that was what I thought it was.
Because it's actually distanced itself from its origin. Like, I doubt that if you ask any K-pop stan, where does the word stan come from? Like, I doubt that anyone would know. But like us hip hop fans, like, we know where it comes from. You know, like nobody used the word stan before Eminem came out with Stan. Great song, by the way.
I thought that someone had just told me that like in jest, and then I believe that's why I had to ask if there was like a deeper meaning to that. Well, anyway, one thing, Lex, we like to look at for perspective on here is what else was going on in music at that moment that allowed Psy to become the hugest thing in the world at that time. And dude, 2012 was pretty good for music,
right?
When I look at this, it's like Fun, We Are Young, great song.
Yeah.
Carly Rae Jepsen, Call Me Maybe.
There we go.
Song,
that was another one hit wonder-ish.
Oh, come on now. Carly Rae's had some other hits. I'm a bit of a Carly Rae stan, I will admit.
There you go.
But Carly Rae, she just has hit after hit. She has that I really like you song has Tom Hanks in the video. That has to be.
So it's funny because like I'm looking at the list that I sent Chris, and like I remember this time on the radio because it felt like, the four biggest songs were four songs that I felt like you could not escape that year, and it was We Are Young, Call Me Maybe, Maroon 5, One More Night, and Somebody That I Used to Know. And I felt like no matter where you went, like if you walked into a building, one of those four songs was playing on the radio inside that building at any given moment.
These are songs from my youth. It's funny. I turned 18 that year, and I think that's a really formative time in my kind of like music curation, music appreciation time. And I remember those songs very fondly because they remind me of like the beginning of college.
This episode is brought to you by Sol de Janeiro. At Sol de Janeiro, touch isn't just for screens. Physical connection is so essential to how we communicate. It's infused in everything we offer. Scents so irresistible, PDA is guaranteed. Textures are so luscious, skin is huggable. Get into a Sol de Janeiro state of mind. Receive 10% off on your first order on soldejaneiro.com. Plus free shipping with the code SOLDEJaneiro10.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard. PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
It was a lot of times we look at these years and we're kind of like, oh God, I see why this song took off. But this year, so it's kind of extra impressive that Psy was able to break through with I'm not going to say it's a bad song. It's a fun song, but it's also a silly song. It's a novelty song. Hey, I know I keep getting, my brain goes in 50 different ways, but what does Oppa? What's Oppa?
Great question. So Oppan Gangnam Style. Oppa is a term it's a slang term. It's like an endearing term for Korean women to use to refer to like older brothers, older guys, like, guys that are a couple years older, like, the way you would refer to like a senpai in like anime or that sort of thing. It's like an affectionate way to refer to like an older guy, like someone that you're attracted to. And so when Psy says Oppan Gangnam Style, what he means is he's referring to himself in the third person. He's like, your big brother is Gangnam Style. So it's silly. Yeah.
The behind the scenes on One Hit Thunder is that the guest picks an artist, and then I, while working with that guest, curate a playlist for Chris, the guest, and myself to listen to kind of get a vibe of the artist outside of their one hit. And I can't speak for Chris, but I, and Lex knows because I was messaging her all week about it, really fell in love with Psy's music. Like, there are some songs that are just super fun. I Love It has an incredibly just like fire beat. Like, I love the music for it. I Remember You was really, really good. And I really like the song New Face. And I actually knew one other song by him, which was Gentleman, which I think is like low key a better song than Gangnam Style. But
it was also kind of a hit, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it reached number, let me see, I think it hit number five on the Billboard Hot 100, which is crazy.
Yeah, so no one's really remembering Gentleman too much right now, but Gangnam Style will be popular for the rest of our lives. That will be played at weddings and at wherever, clubs and things forever. So that's why I would consider him a one-hit wonder. That is the one hit. Although number 5, that's kind of a hit. That's big.
Yeah. I would say that definitely some like smaller splashes that he made, but like that Gangnam Style is definitely like the international like breakthrough thing. So I think it's like fair to consider that's like an international one hit wonder. Like it fits that description.
I mean, he had a song with Snoop Dogg too, and that song only hit 266.
Sorry, no, that's incorrect. I saw that in the notes this season. It actually made it to 62.
Okay, all right.
I threw an extra 6 in there, but
still a minor hit in comparison, but not quite as bad. I was gonna say, like, damn, 266. That's a major drop. But
we've talked about this before of like the potential of some songs only becoming a success because they're kind of riding the wave of the hit that came before it. Yeah, for sure. And I think Gentleman is definitely like falls into that category. Like, I think if Gentleman was released 3 or 4 years after Gangnam Style, we wouldn't be saying that it hit number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Yeah. Yeah, here's what I think actually happened. I think Psy was just kind of doing his thing. Like, he is unabashedly himself. That's one of the reasons why I love him. He's definitely one of my idols. He's not concerned about conforming to the perfect standards of K-pop, which is kind of ironic that he actually opened the door for K-pop in the Western world. He's definitely not the standard K-pop person that you would think of. He's not like, young, chiseled, or, picture perfect or anything like that. But what he is like super authentic. And he does his thing. He likes being goofy. He enjoys being who he is. And when he was making Gangnam Style, he was being who he was. And once it blew up, he wasn't expecting it to blow up. He talks about it in interviews all the time. He's like, oh, it just happened overnight. I bet that he and his team definitely felt pressure to follow up to that release while still maintaining that authenticity that he's been doing for so long. So I think Gentleman's kind of like a mixed product of that, where he followed up Gangnam Style success, was riding the coattails a little bit, and yeah, it did moderately well. Like, it has like 1 billion views on YouTube. I think it was like a good follow-up. Now, what happened with Hangover with Snoop Dogg was like, I think that was Psy being like throwing caution to the wind. He was like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to keep being myself. I'm just going to do whatever I want. I want to work with Snoop Dogg. Like, let's see how this goes.
If you have the opportunity,
yeah,
every single one of us on this call can name at least one person where if we had even like an ounce of success in the career that we wanted, we'd be like, well, fuck it. I'm going to try to hang out with this person for a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to try to get that guest vocal from Bjork. And one thing that I do want to mention that is in our notes about Psy is that what sparked his love of music was seeing a performance of Queen performing Bohemian Rhapsody, which
that's so good.
Yeah, I mean, could you possibly be inspired by something better? I don't even know if it's possible that you could be inspired by something better than that. And it makes sense. Freddie Mercury's this bold,
larger than life personality.
Yeah, larger than life. And Psy did that as a dude who doesn't necessarily, just like Lex was saying, doesn't necessarily look like this chiseled front man you'd expect, but it didn't matter. It was the song. It was who he was more than what he looked like. It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
There's something about Psy, and I won't say it in a musical standpoint, but in like a personality trait that like the more I researched him, the more I was like, this guy's kind of punk rock.
Yeah.
Like he does not give a fuck. Like I love that like in the early life portion of his wiki is a quote from his teacher that was like, I kind of hated him as a student. Like, and just was like, all he would do was like make sexual jokes in the back of class while I was trying to teach. And I was like, God, that just seems so badass. Or like the way that he just kind of snuck his way out of having to do the mandatory military service, and then they were like, like he like, oh no, I'm doing this thing, I'm working for this company, so I can't. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then he like continued to put out music and win awards, and they're like, that's not the thing that you said you were doing. You have to go to the like there's just so many. There was another thing where it's like he dropped out of school and used his tuition to just buy all the instruments that he needed so that he could get into Berkeley. Like that's so many weird things that I'm like, this dude is someone to idolize.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's a freaking icon. Like I would definitely say that he has this punk rock ethos. Just like, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna do what I want to do, you know. And I think that he also gets a lot of, you know, it makes sense when he was watching Queen, because he's got this like really charismatic stage presence. He's like, I'm gonna be myself, but I'm also gonna be like the most entertaining and like energetic showman possible.
Yeah. I guess maybe you touched on this a little bit earlier, Lex, but was he already a star in Korea though?
Yeah.
For a while before this song?
I think this was like his third or fourth album.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you said he won awards already. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know the degree at which he was like, you know, a really, really big hit. I just know that when I heard Gangnam Style, I hadn't heard of him before as like a Taiwanese person, but like within Korea, I think that he was probably like at like a legend status. He was kind of like, I think people consider him sort of like the father of K-pop. Where I don't know if he like established K-pop, but he's kind of like this like dad figure in K-pop. That's what I figure.
So he already had that legacy. He already had that title before, because the music video is a very like, I mean, that looks like $1 million music video, or you know.
So looking on his awards portion of Wiki, his first nomination was in 2001 for Best New Male Artist, and his first win was in 2005 for Best Video.
Oh.
Wow.
So yeah, he'd been doing all right in South Korea for the South Korean Music Awards.
I feel really bad for not knowing who he was before that, but I mean, I guess, you know, how would I necessarily be exposed to it minus digging on my own? It wasn't like I knew anyone who listened to him, so that's impressive, and that's cool.
I mean,
I
would say think about the fact that like in all of the other countries in the world, there's probably a number one best-selling artist that none of the three of us have ever heard of and know nothing about, but they're like a superstar there. You know what I mean?
Hey, Lex, I always bring this up on here is, you know, and I'm sure you can relate too, are how much I like the people that get this one hit after they've had this long career, and you know that they've put the work in, and it's so much better than the people that are like, oh, the first song they ever released, they were put together by a record label, and the first song they ever released was this huge hit, and then they just disappeared. Like, I just like these people that like had this, like put the time in and paid their dues. And it sounds like Psy really paid his dues. I mean, if you're saying he best new artist, he was nominated for that in 2001, that means 11 years later is when he had this massive worldwide hit, and that's cool.
I think it just goes to show that you can see success at any age, and you should just keep creating content that's authentic to you. That's the mantra that I live by too. I think that you know, you shouldn't be concerned that you're getting too old or that sort of thing. Now there is one exception that I want to raise in contrast to your point that, you know, someone's first hit becomes their first song. I think Lil Nas X is pretty awesome. Like, I think like when he dropped Old Town Road, like it was just like the storm, the summer song of 2019, and like his follow-ups are great. He's got great music videos, really high production quality, and he's also super authentic, super punk rock, just complete memester. He's amazing at Twitter, amazing on the internet. Like, I think he's like a modern day icon where I can really see this kind of like Psy level, like don't give a fuck. So I really respect that guy.
Yeah, and I feel like Lil Nas X is going to be one of those dudes where I don't think that he's ever going to have another hit like Old Town Road, but I think that he will be fine. Like, I don't think that he's going to be like one of those one-hit wonders where everyone's like, oh, whatever happened to him? Like, he's
struggling.
He's so yeah, like he's so talented and so smart and so young that I could see him maneuvering into like other fields outside of music and continuing to go. Yeah, like
he's set for life. I'm sure of that. Dude's a genius. Like, you really.
That EP was so good.
I know.
Like, I remember listening to it when it came out. And I was like, all right, let's see how this is just going to be 7 songs that sound exactly the same. And I was like, oh no. No, he's trying all types of crazy stuff on these 7 songs.
That's what I love. Yeah.
You know, I love that he fucked with the country radio and stuff. Like, that was amazing.
Oh, just expose the pure racism of the country radio station.
Absolutely. And that was badass. I do have to say, I'm not really a fan of the actual song. I just, the actual song doesn't do it for me, but everything else about that dude, I think, is awesome.
So I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to say in advance that it's also a little bit of a segue. But would you potentially throw Lil Nas X into the genre of nerdcore and tell us about Lex the Lexicon Artist and nerdcore music?
Yeah, I would definitely say that some of the things he does are nerdcore, and definitely in the style of nerdcore that like I enjoy. And what I mean by that is like he embodies the ethos of nerdcore. And I actually think that Psy also embodies the ethos of nerdcore, which is like, just be yourself. Like, really don't care about commercial viability or, you know, looking pretty or that sort of thing. I mean, Lil Nas X is a pretty guy, but all that aside, I think they really just do what they want. Obviously, with major label backing behind them, they're able to make these beautiful music videos. And really quick tangent here, I think like one of the great things that I love about K-pop is that they've always been on the forefront of like production. Like, all the music videos look great, all size production sounds amazing and professional. Like, I can't really say that for, you know, some of the new Taiwanese music that's come out. You know, I know this sounds bad, but like I think a lot of Taiwanese music was trying to emulate the K-pop sound at the time, and some of it really didn't succeed. And yeah, I think like, you know, K-pop was a really good kind of tastemaker for, you know, the way that things should sound. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about, I think that they had the resources to make things sound good and look good, but none of that would be really meaningful without the personality behind it, right? Like, I don't think Lil Nas or Psy would be as interesting if they didn't have this like charming, charismatic personality, just being very unabashed about things that they like and that the way that they want to be seen. And as far as Lil Nas X specifically, I think he definitely takes after some, you know, like nerdcore aesthetics. Like, let's say like the music video for Rodeo, for example. I'm kind of spoiling this a bit, but he has Nas show up dressed like Lawrence Fishburne from The Matrix, and it's great. It's just like he loves cosplay. I think that's obvious. In the music video for Panini, it's this entire like cyberpunk kind of thing where he does this dancing, but in this like futuristic world that's occupied by holograms. And, you know, I think a lot of that fits into the kind of nerdcore artist aesthetic. And the way that his humor is also pretty nerdcore as well. As far as the way that he interacts with people on Twitter, he's like a meme person, right? He's very memey. He understands the modern meme discourse, whatever that means to you. And he knows how to be funny. And I think a lot of like nerdcore artists in my community are also funny in that way. So yeah, I would definitely consider some of the things he does to have a nerdcore aesthetic.
That is a good point, because like I think of, as cool as it is that Psy got to do a song with Snoop Dogg and Lil Nas X got to do a song with Nas, both of those guys, I feel like in the grand scheme of things, would probably have more fun hanging out with like an MC Chris or an MC Lars or someone where I feel like they would just be geeking out about the weirdest
Yeah.
the weirdest stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would agree with that. I think that even a lot of the artists that we think about who are not nerdy, like Snoop Dogg or Nas, for example, like, or even like Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion. But Megan Thee Stallion is very obviously very nerdy because she really likes My Hero Academia. I think that all of these people probably have like something that they're nerdy about.
If somebody didn't have things they're nerdy about, wouldn't that be the most boring person on earth?
It would. And there are a lot of people like that.
I always jokingly say, like, you can't convince me that Wu-Tang Clan's first album isn't like early nerdcore, because it's just like comic book references, like kung fu movie references. Like, it is just stacked with deep cut geeky references out the ass. It sounds a lot more intimidating than like MC Chris or MC Lars, but like lyrically the content is almost exactly the same.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can't imagine being able to even have a conversation with somebody that I couldn't talk about, like, I don't know, Studio Ghibli movies or like what shows you're binging or whatever. Like, and you know what's crazy? Yeah, you're right. Sometimes I guess I have met, I met a couple people like that this week.
There are a lot of people like that.
That are just vapid people. Like, I can't imagine being like that. That sounds like the most boring existence.
I think that, as I mentioned, there are a lot of people like that actually who are having a really hard time during lockdown because like they can't go out to the bar, they can't go out and drink, and like their entire existence is, we go to work, we get out of work, we go to happy hour, we go home, and we watch TV, and that's it. And like that's like their entire existence. Like I remember hanging out with some people and like they didn't know what fan fiction was. I was like, what? It was just like a revelation to me that we live in this really special bubble where we like geeking out about things, but some people just don't have interests. And there are actually a lot of people like that. And you know, people who don't have interest, what do they do to fill the time? They drink.
Well, I do that too, but I still can't imagine not getting geeked out about certain things, you know. At least
I can't either.
Well, I think that's like the thing that's the hardest for me during lockdown has been like losing conventions, and it sucks because those are also like, given the state of everything, the thing that I'm like least comfortable going to until like there are some serious changes, because they're very unhealthy places and you leave sick from them anyway. But like so many friends of mine, so many like podcasting friends or just regular friends I've made just from interacting with somebody at a location where you're already there because you all love horror movies or you all love comic books or you're all like really into, you know, retro video games or whatever it is. It's so easy to just start up a conversation with a stranger versus like, I don't know, you're not just going to be sitting at a diner and just start talking to someone a couple booths away just for the hell of it. Like, like you don't know where the starting point is.
You're not going to talk about Death Note.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great place to make friends. And it's a great place to drink. So there's something for everyone.
Hey, so we got to just, I don't even know if we need to ask this for this episode, but we always talk about whether the song brought the one-hit thunder or if it was a one-hit blunder. Do we even need to go there on this one? I think that we might all be on the same page.
Oh yeah, lightning struck with this. This is one-hit thunder all the way.
Yeah.
Hey, this has been really nice talking to you, Lex. I like that you brought a unique perspective. You got to experience it, like this song in two different places, right? Or you say you were still in Taiwan when this came out, but then you moved while this song was still popular? Was that
like
what
a month later?
Yeah,
wow.
I think so. Yeah, it was the timing thing was a little hazy, but yeah, I think I did get to experience this in two different places and see the impact that it had in two different places.
Well, that's great. And thanks a lot for coming on. I wish you all the best. And hopefully we're all, you know, playing shows and going to conventions and doing all that fun stuff. I don't know. I hope a year from now, but we'll see.
I think it'll be less than that. I think it'll be like end of this year, beginning of next year, but don't hold my promise on that. Let's wait for the scientists.
Yeah, I like the optimism. I just don't like the people that are in charge of, making that happen. So we'll see. I hope you're right.
I hope so too.
Cool.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really fun.
It's time to party hop. Whoa, it's time to party hop. Whoa, it's time to party hop.
This has been One Hit Thunder. One Hit Thunder is produced by Matt Kelly as part of the Geekscape Network and hosted by Chris Fafalios of the bands Punchline, Peck, and Another Cheetah. Underneath me is Party Hop by Lexi the Lexicon Artist, this week's guest. Check out our music on Spotify and literally anywhere else that you can listen to music. Also check out Punchline's music at punchline.com. Let us know your thoughts on the show by emailing us at onehitthunderpodcast@gmail.com and make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting apps. Tune in next week for another episode of One Hit Thunder.
I don't want to buy another glass of wine, I got time. Think the party got a late start. I gotta leave at 12 cause I gotta make bar. I just want to take part in all the cool shit in town. Pulling up the calendar to move shit around. White background, not your face. It's time to make the rounds all over the place. But first, we leave quietly without a trace. Defend the party bound into outer space. Come on.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty, host of the Punk Rock NBA podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. My podcast is all about doing what you love for a living, and every week I sit down and talk to people who have done exactly that. For example, musicians like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me, Matt from Periphery, Lil Lotus and Shinigami, among many others, photographers, artists, designers, YouTubers like Glenn Fricker and Sarah Dici, and I unpack exactly how they got to where they are today with the goal of helping you do the same. So if that sounds cool, you can listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com, and I'll see you there.